Hey guys, how's it going? James here. Today we're going to be talking about The Basic Eight by Daniel Handler. Now, Daniel Handler is a name that I think probably a fair amount of the book community probably don't know, but you probably have heard of his work. He's better known, I guess, as Lemony Snicket, the creator of and obviously the author of the series of unfortunate events. The Basic Eight is I think it's his debut adult novel. It was written before Series of Unfortunate Events, but it appears that his adult work hasn't quite reached the same mass appeal. The Basic Eight is about a satanic, murderous ritual. It's not really, though. So it's about this group of teenagers that are like the most upper crust pretentious teens you'll ever find. And we know from the beginning of the story that they've been implicated and convicted of a murder. And there are overtures to satanic elements to the murder. And we experience the story as told from the jail cell of one of the members of the Basic Eight, called Flannery Culp. Flannery is a teenage girl who basically she is writing a tell-all true crime story about her own crime, based on like using fragments of her diary from the time. So you get the writing style is really interesting because you get the perspective of Flannery looking back at the things that she wrote in her diary, which creates this really interesting unreliable narrator situation where like she'll write elements to the story to make the story sound more interesting and compelling. Like she'll talk about this conversation that she had with her friend Natasha in their car, and she writes this whole thing as though without introducing it as something different, as just sort of a bit in her diary. And then at the end of that passage she'll write, at least I'm sure at some point that conversation did happen, whether or not it was in this car or on these are the right words, who knows, but I'm sure I definitely said something like that at some time. So it's really an interesting format for the story, and I love these kind of stories. Like put the words it's about a cult in any book, and I'm almost certainly gonna be interested and pick it up at bare minimum. And this one it took me by surprise. If you're familiar with the film or the musical Heathers, it's basically got that same sort of tone to it. It's got macabre elements, but also is very humorous in a lot of places, as is to be expected from the man who brought us a series of unfortunate events, a tale of macabre, disturbing things with a lick of sardonic humor and irony layered in there. So the writing style is just perfect for that. Like, I think Daniel Handler has a really good way of turning a phrase, and it presents itself. Like, I think one of the criticisms that people would levy at something like this is it's so pretentious. All the characters are pretentious. And like, yes, all of the characters are proper pretentious weirdos. Like Flannery Culp and the Basic Eight. Like what the Basic Eight is a group of 8 friends who in high school get together with their teacher who like their pretentious teacher in the mornings for breakfast to listen to opera, and they have regular dinner parties. They're like, the dinner party season has begun. The Basic Eight, the 8 of us shall be there, but who else? Like it's those kind of people, okay? Like, and they're a very interesting cast of characters in all of the different ways that they express that sort of pretentiousness. Like it's kind of got that, rose-colored lenses kind of view of if you were looking back at your group of friends in school, or like when you were growing up, like your group of friends, you're like, oh, Douglas and Lily, like they come as a pair, like because they're dating, and you're like, when people think of them, they think of them together. It's sort of that kind of thing where like everyone has like a role to play in this group in your mind, and I think a lot of friendship groups sort of have that kind of thing. Like you have sort of like sub cliques within the clique, if you get what I mean. The story itself is very interesting because it evolves very slowly and ratchets up in tension, because we know sort of the final outcome, like we know what ultimately happens, but we don't know how. And sort of you get like Flannery starts to count down in the passages, because obviously she's editing this after the fact. Like she counts down like to the time where the incident takes place, which is a great suspense building device. Like it's classic Hitchcockian suspension with the show the bomb under the table and show the clock ticking. You know, it's that kind of thing. And I think when it starts to, like, my experience of reading this book is it was kind of like I wasn't really feeling it at the beginning, but then as it started to unfold, I like became more and more drawn in to this world and these characters, and just sort of try and figure out what was going on, because there's a lot of stuff towards the later half of the book, especially leading up to the climax moment, where things just start falling apart. Like you've got the combination of a narrator who is probably almost definitely delusional about the situation as it happened, trying to recount that version as fact, but also sort of tailoring it to bit. It's really hard to explain. Like she's trying to explain what happened in her diary at the time, where she doesn't really know what happened because there's a lot of alcohol involved. So she's trying to explain it in the diary passage, but also editing it after the fact so she can clarify certain bits and twist things to be maybe less obvious than what they were. And it's just a very disorienting read. Like towards the climax, there's a big, like there's a huge, like there's a big whole section where sort of there's a big typical teenage party where everyone's getting drunk and things are getting trashed. But the way the narrative is presented, like the way the prose is done, it dislodges your sense of reality in the text. Like people will start calling each other by different names, or characters will start appearing in one place and then magically teleporting somewhere else. And it, in theory, that's bad writing, right? Like the scene is poorly blocked. That character was downstairs and now they've appeared in this garden 2 miles away. Like, it's genius though. Like, it's when you're really, really off your face drunk, that is sort of the perception of the world you have. Like, time compresses and expands. Like, things that you thought took place over 10 minutes happened over 2 hours. You know, distances you travel, you sort of unconsciously stagger towards a place and then find yourself in a bathroom and you're like, how did I get here? Who knows? And you'd start not recognizing people, and people say weird things to you and you're not sure what's real anymore. And that sort of, the way that was put across in text is just superb. It's a really interesting read. I mean, I've said that so many times now, I'm sure. But yeah, I mean, there's not too much more to say about it, because ultimately it's a very simple story. The characters are they're simplistic, but they're not, you know, shallow. You get the point of the characters in the narrative, and because you're seeing it through Flannery's lens, sort of her perception of her friends is all you really see. You don't get inside the heads of other people. But because she's an unreliable narrator, you start to wonder, like, well, are these people really the way you say they are? and it has got its twists and turns. It's not like a horror book. There's nothing supernatural going on, despite the it brings up the whole satanic panic kind of thing, which I think was a nice touch. Like, because one of the elements of the book, because it's written after the fact, Flannery gets to comment on like the media response to the crime, which is a really interesting sort of way of presenting those things. Like, it often intercuts things like, well, you know, on the essentially the stand-in for Oprah Winfrey, like they call her Mopra something, like it's very obvious, but like it's like, oh, on that show, you know, they had the victim's mum come out and she was crying, but she, you know, she doesn't really know what happened. It was all bollocks. I feel like I was slandered. And it's like, at the same time, you realise you're in jail for murder of this woman's son. Can we trust you, Flannery? It's a very compelling read. I'm interested in reading more of Daniel Handler stuff. Because he's done a load of adult novels that I've never heard of. And I don't know if they actually got published in England, like physically. Maybe they did, but like they're out of print or something. Like, I could only find the Kindle version of this. And to be honest, I'm really glad I took the chance to read it, because the series of unfortunate events, like for me growing up, that was my thing. Like, that was my Harry Potter. People are like, oh, Harry Potter, it's the best book ever. And I'm like, I'm going to just sit over here and read this book about sad orphans. Okay? And now, as an adult, I feel that might have warped my view of things a bit and turned me into someone who enjoys these sort of darker, weird, surreal, but in like real life, but with a surreal edge, like kind of stories. I really like that, and I really love this book. I'd encourage you to check it out if it is your kind of thing. There is drinking and debauchery and some sexual assault, maybe, but it's not. Yeah, no, so content warning for like sexual assault and that kind of stuff. If that is something that bothers you, it does come up. It's quite prevalent in the plot, so be forewarned. But other than that, very enjoyable read. It had that really deliciously dark humour that I love from the Lemony Snicket stuff, and hopefully I'll see more of if I get round to reading more Daniel Handler. So if you've read The Basic 8, please tell me in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. And if you haven't, maybe go check it out and then come back to this review and tell me what you thought. That's it for now. Nice quick review, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.